Hello and welcome to the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. We are joined in the studio today with my dear friend Brynley Stent.
Hi!
Comedian, performer, writer, actor, tabletop actual player. We have played together often for all these times.
We have.
Joined also, as always, by Matt. And we're here today to discuss...
No accolades.
No accolades. We're joined here today by Matt, who's had a haircut.
Yay!
We're here to talk today about the role of comedy at our D&D tables.
Yeah.
And I thought that Bryn would be a great guest for this because, Bryn, you got comedy. You're just all comedy.
I got comedy.
You got comedy.
And it's an interesting one as well to sort of frame this as we get into it, because there's sort of two perspectives to this here, right? And really it comes down to who is your comedy for? Because obviously the both of you have been involved in a number of actual play games where the comedy is for an audience, but actually in your home game, the comedy is not so often for the audience, it is for the other people at the table. However, there's an interesting abstraction between the in-universe and the out-of-universe. In-universe comedy is for the audience of out-of-universe people at the table. So there are quite a lot of
Wait, are you
lessons
following
in
that?
there.
I got a
I'm
bit
not
confused
following
about
that.
universes.
So if you, let's say we're above the table.
We have an episode on diegesis coming up, so this is kind of linked into that.
But let's say we're above the table in an actual play situation,
Yeah.
and you do something, and I make a joke about that
And
thing
then
that
we
you're
laugh,
doing.
okay.
And we're laughing, and the audience is laughing, and I've made that joke for the audience's benefit, right? But if your character says something and my character cracks wise in response, that is not a joke for our character's benefits necessarily. It might be a little bit funny, but it's for us at the table. So the players at the table become the audience.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I often find one of the first things that I remember when we were setting up Fury of the Small was that I remember going as GM, like, I was very anxious that I wasn't very funny in the context of, doing an actual play. But then realizing over the course of, like, the putting it together that actually it was the players were sort of bringing their own fun for the audience, but also for each other.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of how my home games feel at the same time.
I want to put an asterisk on that to revisit, because I've got a really interesting point to follow up on that. But first, otherwise we're just going to end up talking and Bryn's going to sit here contributing
It's true.
absolutely
It's a
nothing.
bad habit.
So,
Hey,
Bryn,
I love
how does one be funny?
Trauma in your early years. Bullied at high school.
I think that's a
high regard of self-regard.
I think that's a misconception. I think it's actually gastrointestinal issues like IBS. That's the source of comedy.
Really?
Yeah.
Fart
yeah,
jokes.
It's a going theory.
You have to find a good source, a good well early on
Yeah,
to
yeah,
support
Yeah,
yourself.
it's not trauma. It's like celiac. That's what makes someone funny. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think some people are just born with a clown in them. And no, actually, everyone is born with a clown in them. Just different types of clowns, I think. I think there are sad clowns, there are happy clowns, there are show-off clowns. There are some people who are like the quietest people I know who are extremely funny.
Do you think that people's D&D characters are a form of clown?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because
that's so
we
interesting.
went to drama school at the same
Yes.
time, and obviously as part of acting and stuff like that, you find like your clown and your type of clowning, and it takes a lot of weeding through ones that are wrong, like you're like, I'm this type of person, and then it's like, no, you're not. And then
Actually-
you find out your clown is like a little nerd that you're like, oh, damn it, I didn't want to be this, but it's where you find your most
Because
comedy.
I guess what we're getting at here for the audience's benefit, when we're saying the word clown here, what we're kind of talking about is that exaggerated persona, that
Yeah.
exaggerated version of self. And I mean, we already kind of intuitively understand that in fantasy RPGs or TTRPGs in general, because oftentimes we will use them to explore certain parts of ourselves or sort of inject or amplify certain parts of our personality into something that is not necessarily like us. I am not a very macho guy, but like playing just a big hulking tough guy is a lot of fun for me, because to me that's playing against type, but that is an intentional that is an intentional face that I'm putting on.
Yeah.
We call it like a drama school. It's kind of like your pleasure or your sense of play
Yeah.
comes from donning that particular persona.
Yeah.
What are your clowns when you play D&D, when you think about it?
Well, I'm always drawn to like critters, strange little
Just
things
little
like that.
freaks and
yeah, little
weirdos.
freaks.
Yeah.
A lot of kobolds, a lot of goblins, that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. But I also think, to your point, is that I think there is so much comedy in everything, and often people are like, oh, the comedy characters are the dumb characters or the clown-like characters, but they're not. Like, for instance, there was a character that I played in one of Paddy's games for Drakkenheim, which was like basically a 40-year-old woman paladin. And she, on paper, not funny. Not a funny character at all. But there just comes some beautiful comedy from just playing the character for real in those situations, right?
Well, and I think the thing that you're kind of getting at, which is the asterisk that I'd put on your statement from earlier, is the role of the straight man in comedy. The idea of a foil. And I actually think that's one of the difficulties with being funny at the table is, especially if you're like me and I'm mostly running a home game. Like, I'm not running for an audience or anything. It's me and my friends. We're hanging out. This is one of the major ways we socialize. We want to hang out and crack jokes like we would if we're all just hanging around, having some beers and shooting the breeze. But we are still trying to tell the story and keep things going somewhere and maintain a somewhat consistent characterization. And that actually breaks down really quickly if everyone is trying to be funny all the time, including the GM. And I think it's very important in that instance. I would even say this is actually true for an actual play. Actual plays suck when everyone's trying to be the Sam Riegel, the funny one. And like, Sam Riegel is not cracking wise. He's not like telling crazy jokes. He's often very restrained. He's he's a bit witty, but he's not like... Anyway, point being, consider playing the role of the straight man within your group's dynamic in universe. Out of universe, I'm of the opinion that the majority of the time the straight man is actually the GM, which is something that I struggle with because I'm always out here cracking wise. And actually in that role, I have to not be doing that because it is my job. If something absolutely silly has happened in game and somebody makes a joke about like pulling down the shopkeeper's trousers and we sort of carry on the bit for a minute, it's actually me who has to then sit in the editor's chair and basically say, okay, that wasn't actually canon. Here's how the interaction played out in reality so that we can have a fun without sort of breaking the narrative of the universe.
Sorry, what do you...
Oh, I was just going to say, I've come through theatre, sports and improv is one of my backgrounds mostly. And there is this whole thing with theatre sports games where like the MC is like the straight man and similar to the DM. And they become very funny by just the sense of them herding cats. Like, that is funny. Or people sucking up to them and them being like, no, like, fuck off, Like, all of that is so funny. But like, it's just the role of teacher, the role of like, I am the disciplinarian is so funny.
Which is kind of like its own clown or its own hat to wear.
Yes.
Like, we play with a GM, wonderful former friend Tom Clark, who is very funny in that role. He loves, like, it's Curse of Strahd, and he's constantly telling us how bad we're all going to die and how terrible things are going to get. And then the sort of the gremlin feeling of us in players as we play that game is, it's like, I don't think any of us are playing a comedy character in that campaign. Like, we're kind of we all bought in hard to the gothic fantasy at the outset of it. But I think that some of like the fall apart, cry laughing moments that I've ever had in a D&D game have come inside that Curse of Strahd. In part, I think, because of how intense the darkness is on the other side of things. Like, the darkness lets us... it's like that. It's that release laughter, which is so different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a moment like that in Fury of the Small as well. Like your super sad moment where we learn about spoilers for Fury of the Small. There's a very sad flashback with Bryn, and there was this incredible moment that didn't feel very actual play-y. We all bought into the moment, and then the scene started to move on, and then everybody just started had this release laughter moment of going like, that was.
It was too sad.
It was too sad. It was too.
Yeah, it was too, what's the word for it? Sacred.
Yeah.
Like, my drama teacher used to use that word a lot. He used to be like, don't worry, it's like, don't be too sacred, because there's this feeling of like, we must be careful and we must give this moment its weight. And so I think everyone was a bit holding it in, and then it was like, it kind of finished, we were like, okay, let's let it out now.
Well, I think this is where the idea of bathos, or the undercutting of tension, is actually very helpful to let us have those serious moments and then deliver us a relief without ruining that moment. I know that that's something that's become much maligned over, I'd say, the last 10 years. People often talk about like the Marvelization of dialogue, where everyone's quippy, like no one can have a dramatic moment. Somebody's always got to come in with a snarky comment, and it is very much. It could be like that if done poorly, but if it's done well. Really, it's just a way to let us all out of that moment, have a little bit of a release, let out that nervous laugh. It's not necessarily a funny one, but it's giving us something. It's just giving us the okay that we're done here. And there's a bit of an art to doing that in a way that doesn't actually undercut
Yeah,
it doesn't
what's
trash
just
the
happened to the
campaign.
player.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
And I wish I could come up with an example on the spot. I guess I'm not a very good GM.
Well, I mean, I think the one that we're talking about, the Fury of the Small one, is because it was a very big moment. It was like a flashback. Bryn had to like play like a child version of your character. We were basically unpacking a key moment of backstory, and everyone at the table held like the importance of that moment for the moment that it was there, and which is hard to do. And I feel like that's an actual play thing, but also players who are really trusting and experiencing, and who knew from the establishing, I suppose, in your session 0 again, or like what everyone at the table knows the story's going to be about, where that's going to go. Because let's say that when you're setting up a world or a narrative that is in like a more Terry Pratchett-esque sort of like world where everything ultimately does have a punchline to it.
Everything's a bit absurd,
Yeah.
but it's not, again, the word for it is that it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily silly all the time, or like trying to make a joke out of everything or make everything non-serious. It's often, in fact, actually, it's extremely self-serious is how it works.
So like part of that is like, can everyone at the table, are you all connected enough? Do you know the story enough that we can all come back to what we know the story that we're actually telling, even though sometimes the silliness can get so high and like so baked into the content of the story.
It's that role again. I think this is very much on the GM to editorialize and reset the tone and sort of make the cut and sit in the editor's chair and go, that scene wasn't canon, or it didn't actually happen that way. It happened like this. I think it's a GM skill. I want to go a little bit more onto the player side now, though, because we've got a couple of minutes, and because you mentioned your middle-aged lady character. Going around the table, like, what are some of the funnier characters we've played, and how did we approach that? What kind of funny were we trying to engender? I'm happy to go first if you need a second to come up with your example.
I know that mine is often, because I love as GM the ability to create a character that means that I can step out of shaping the story too much. So I love to play characters who think they're very clever but are actually dunces, which is really, really fun. My character called Humphrey Habsburg Orpington, who actually looks quite a lot like you in my mind's eye. He's like
pre-haircut or
maybe no, his hair is curly.
Okay,
he's like a bit of a Prince Charles type with like a big moustache, but it's like a character who can think that they're really onto what's happening in the story, but actually the fun is the playing is actively not knowing and playing against that.
It's letting
knowledge.
Yourself be the butt of the joke.
Absolutely,
there.
so much fun.
Does anything come to mind for you?
Honestly, I truly believe that any character is funny as long as you commit to it. And like the thing that makes me laugh the most is what is the obvious choice. Does that make sense? It's like sort of, again, in theatre sports. Like if we are in a theatre sports scene or an improv scene and someone's like, we're in a base level of the beach, and then someone's like, I'm an alien. It's like, we're like, that's not funny. But if you're like really hyper specific about these things from the beach, then people are like, oh my gosh, that is funny because I get that. And I think that's where I get the most joy from D&D is when people are like, I am playing this archetype that you all know so well, and I'm so specific in it. Because then you get all the joy from the little unexpected moments, because you're like, oh, you're playing the specificity of this character. Like often it is those moments where you're like, we were expecting that scene to come, in Fury of the Small. Like we were expecting it, we knew it was going to happen, and we've seen that scene play out 100 times, but it's just like you're like waiting for the moment, and you go there and you're like, oh, here it is, and it's beautiful.
And we do often in our fantasy stories, we know the beats that we're approaching, and we're really looking forward to living in the fantasy of them, because that's where we play the games.
I'll also, just on that note, the beach got me thinking about that. The funny thing can also be described. It doesn't have to be acted out.
Yeah.
Like if let's say we are an adventuring party on the beach, and you are the very sort of righteous paladin in full plate. Like, you can make a comment about how, he's trying very hard to not seem bothered by the sand in his boots and the fact that his, like, normally quite stoic, measured gait is failing under the soft sand. Like, you can just describe that, and it's not laugh out loud funny, but there is an inherent amusing image that is immediately conjured in everyone's minds.
I also I think about the D&D movie that just came out, and that paladin was so funny. And he's not necessarily cracking jokes. He's just playing the archetype so strongly that you're like, that is so hilarious.
Yeah.
Funny enough, the movie I actually think did a really good job of having the kinds of in-character quips and jokes and bathos that like what happens at a lot of tables. Certainly more similar to what happened at mine.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in that weirdly meta, like nudge, nudge, wink, wink, get a load of this guy kind of way. It was actually quite refreshing to see it quippy, but largely played straight.
Yeah. And I think about in the context of that movie as well, like you think about like the natural ones that are rolled by characters in that movie.
You can feel them.
Yeah, and you can feel them. And a natural one is often there are opportunities, you know, D&D like has like the big moment that is meant to be successful but then ends in abject failure. And so sometimes like the comic response that you're working off, the thing you have to yes and is like the dice roll which is coming forward. And you have to go like, we now need to justify how this goes so terribly wrong or so terribly well when it should have gone wrong.
A friend of our Tom, the same person we were talking about before, he recently was playing we were playing a Daggerheart 4-shot campaign, and his character just died, like fully just died, and like in a really unceremonious way, and it was just because he went down to one dice roll. We were all like, the odds were in his favor, I would say. Were they at that point?
I don't know.
Remember.
It's one of the pure things in Nagaheart. You can just choose to let a dice roll pop you back up or go down. Yeah.
But that was so funny because it was just like he was this little frog guy, little ribbit, and it was just like he rolled the dice, he died, and he was like, and then my head gets splat, and we were all like just laughing so much because it was just like unbelievable in a crazy way.
It was a
I
joyful time.
had a very odd situation like that. Again, it was a character death that ended up being really funny. It was a Magus character in a campaign of mine. And we have this weird thing at my table where for some reason, first of all, our Magus players, the characters always die. Don't know why.
I hadn't put Magus. Yeah, that was the one we talked about.
And they roll either terribly or like absolute dynamite. There is no in between. He follows some shady-looking character out into an alleyway, gets shanked with a poison dagger. You know, in response, hits this guy back, rolls a 20. Like, this regular ruffian explodes, right? Like, he's absolutely demolished. But the Magus then rolls so terribly against the poison that he just, like, bleeds out in the alleyway. And then, like, cut back, interior location, nighttime. The rest of the party is sat around the table in the tavern that the Magus just walked out of, and they're like,
what happened?
What's he up to? Where's he gone? And then go out, find this body, these two bodies. Like, what the hell happened here?
Amazing. Hey, Brent, thank you so much for joining us. We have hit time. Thank you so much for joining us on the One Shot Show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What do we say at the end? What's the bit we do at the end?
I don't know. I hope you've leveled up. We're not very good at doing bits on the show. I guess we're just not that funny.
We're not that funny. Thanks so much. We need more, Brent. Bye.
Bye.
If you're enjoying listening to the One Shot Show, why not support us on Patreon? Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow, where you'll be able to find video versions of our episodes, long-form bonus episodes that we release every single month, access to our community Discord server. You can pose questions for our special Q&A episodes, and if you back at the higher tiers, you can even vote on what questions we cover in our show. Check it out.